The voicemail came before the candles even melted. My dad's voice spilled through the speaker light and casual like it was some kind of joke. "We're in Paris," he said, laughing. "We just wanted to keep you busy." The words hit harder than I could process. I stood in the empty restaurant I had spent months preparing, surrounded by pink balloons, untouched plates, and a cake no one would taste. My hands trembled, but I didn't scream or cry. I just listened as his laughter echoed from another continent and realized that my family never planned to come. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever given everything to people who never showed up for you. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 25 years old and grew up in Columbia, Missouri, the kind of small town where Sunday dinners and polite smiles were supposed to mean love. My parents raised me on hard work and quiet gratitude. Dad liked to say family first, and for a long time I believed he meant it. I was the steady one, the dependable daughter who stayed late to help, who organized the reunions, who remembered birthdays, and fixed what others forgot. It wasn't that I wanted praise, I just wanted to belong. Our house always looked like a picture from a magazine. Mom believed appearances were everything. The curtains had to match the season, the kitchen smelled like fresh lemons, and the yard never saw a single weed. Beneath all that shine, though, was a rule we never spoke aloud. Everything had to look perfect, even when it wasn't. I learned early how to swallow my hurt, how to smile through the smallest cuts, and how to pretend that being overlooked was just another way of being strong. I worked as an accounting clerk in a local office, the kind of job that left you counting both hours and heartbeats. My coworkers teased me for being too responsible, but I didn't mind. Every dollar I earned went toward helping my family in some way. When my mom wanted a new set of patio lights, I ordered them. When my dad's truck needed repairs, I chipped in without being asked. I told myself it was what good daughters did. Then, 3 months before my sister Hannah's 16th birthday, Mom decided it had to be a grand celebration, something elegant, memorable, worthy of the Bennett name, as she called it. They didn't ask if I could afford it. They just assumed I'd handle everything. And of course I said yes. Maybe I thought it would bring us closer. Or maybe I just wanted them to look at me with the same pride they saved for Hannah. From that day on, every spare moment belonged to the party. My small apartment turned into a planning station, ribbons stacked in corners, receipts covering the table, handwritten invitations spread across the floor. I spent lunch breaks whispering into my phone about menu changes while my boss sighed loudly from behind his desk. Evenings blurred into nights filled with glitter and tape and to-do lists. Mom would hover, offering opinions like commands. "Hannah prefers roses over carnations," or "make sure the cake has 3 layers this time." Dad would text reminders about not cutting corners on the food. They never offered to help pay for any of it. Still, I told myself it would all be worth it. The restaurant I booked sat by the river, strung with tiny white lights that shimmered like stars when the sun went down. I could already picture Hannah walking in, surprised, smiling, maybe even grateful. I worked on a photo album, filling it with moments from our childhood, our first snowman, our trips to the lake, the way we used to hold hands crossing the street. I wanted to remind her, and maybe my parents too, that we were still a family. The week before the party, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen, something about flights tickets and museums. I froze in the hallway, confused. When I asked later what they meant, Mom brushed it off with a quick smile. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart. Just focus on the party." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but something in my stomach tightened. Still, I pushed the thought away. They wouldn't plan a trip during Hannah's big day. They wouldn't do that to me. The night before the celebration, I barely slept. I checked every list twice, packed the decorations neatly, and double-checked the restaurant reservation. When I called to confirm, the manager's tone was warm but hesitant. "Everything's ready, Miss Bennett," he said, "just waiting on your guests." His words lingered long after I hung up. Guests. I hadn't heard a single confirmation from my family. I texted them one last time before bed, "Tomorrow's going to be perfect." Morning came and my dad called. "Everything ready?" he asked. His voice sounded strange, distant, almost rehearsed. "Yeah," I said softly. "Can't wait for you all to see it." There was a pause, then he said, "Good job, kiddo. It should have felt like praise, but instead, it felt like goodbye." At work that day, my coworker Tara stopped by my desk with a cup of coffee. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. I laughed it off, telling her it was just family stuff. She gave me a knowing look the kind people give when they recognize quiet exhaustion. "Sometimes the ones you do everything for are the ones who forget to show up," she said before walking away. I didn't know it then, but those words would echo louder than any I'd hear from my parents. That evening, the restaurant glowed softly against the water. The band tuned their guitars, and the air smelled like warm bread and candle wax. I checked my phone, no new messages. 6 o'clock passed, then 6:15. I called Hannah, no answer. Mom voicemail. Dad picked up on the third ring, cheerful and casual, like nothing was wrong. And that was when he said it. "We're in Paris. We just wanted to keep you busy." I froze the noise of the room collapsing into silence. The band fell quiet. The server looked at me, unsure what to do. The cake, I'd chosen the one that said Sweet 16. Hannah gleamed untouched under the lights. My chest felt hollow, my breath sharp and steady. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just whispered to the server, "Donate the food, please," and left the restaurant behind. Outside, the river reflected the lights like fractured glass. I stood there for a long time, the night air cold against my skin. Somewhere between the water and the city glow, I understood what I hadn't wanted to see all along. My family never wanted me at all. And that's when something inside me finally went quiet. The night air clung to my skin as I walked away from the restaurant, heels clicking softly against the sidewalk. I didn't look back. The river shimmered under the glow of streetlights, and each reflection felt like a reminder of what I'd lost. Inside everything I'd built, the decorations, the laughter I'd imagined, the hope I'd nurtured for months, was still sitting there, waiting for a family that never planned to come. My phone buzzed in my hand again, another message lighting up the screen, but I turned it face down in my purse. I'd heard enough. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting through my blinds. For a moment, I almost forgot what had happened. Then, the quiet hit me thick and heavy. The dining table still held the leftover boxes from the party supplies I hadn't used, folded napkins, rolls of ribbon, unopened candles. I stood there staring at them, unable to move. My body felt both weightless and impossibly heavy. I brewed a pot of coffee just to fill the silence, the sound of the machine grounding me in the smallest way. I tried to convince myself to go about the day as usual. Work was still waiting, and bills didn't care about heartbreak. But when I sat at my desk, the numbers on the screen blurred. Every time my phone vibrated, I flinched, half expecting another message from my dad explaining it all away. None came. Just silence, and an ache that wouldn't quit. By lunchtime, the silence broke, not with an apology, but with a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was light, rehearsed, almost cheerful. "Hope you didn't go overboard last night, sweetheart," she said. "We thought keeping you busy would be good for you." Good for me. I stared at the phone, the words echoing until they lost meaning. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd used me. And worse, they thought I'd thank them for it. That night, I sat on the couch, scrolling through photos I'd taken during the planning. Balloons, cakes, handwritten cards, all of it felt like evidence of my own foolish hope. I deleted one picture, then another, until the folder was nearly empty. The sound of each tap was strangely satisfying, like shedding old skin. But when I reached the photo of Hannah as a baby, grinning under a blanket of snow, I stopped. I couldn't bring myself to erase that one. The week that followed blurred together. I went to work, I smiled when I had to. I functioned on autopilot. My boss seemed relieved that my constant phone calls had stopped. Tara, though, noticed the difference. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently one afternoon. I shrugged. "Family stuff." She didn't press. She just handed me another cup of coffee and said, "Sometimes the ones we work hardest for are the ones who never notice." Her words landed in a place I didn't know how to name. By Friday, the calls began. At first, 1 or 2 missed ones from Mom, then Dad, then Hannah. Within a day, my phone was lighting up nonstop. 30, 40 calls, sometimes within an hour. I didn't answer. The sound that once sent me scrambling now barely registered. I turned the phone face down on the counter, let it buzz against the wood, and sat in the quiet hum of my apartment. It was almost peaceful. Saturday morning, I gathered every receipt, invoice, and email from the party. Each payment was mine, the restaurant deposit, the bakery, the decorations. I printed them all and slipped the pages into a neat red folder. I labeled it carefully for when they come knocking, because I knew they would. The Bennetts didn't apologize, they justified. I'd been their easy target too long to believe they'd let this go quietly. Sure enough, on Sunday afternoon, a knock rattled my door. 3 sharp hits, too firm to be friendly. I hesitated before opening it. My parents stood there, faces tight and polished, like they were posing for a photograph. Mom was the first to speak. "You humiliated us," she snapped. "Everyone's talking." Dad crossed his arms. "You think you can just walk away after what you did?" I blinked at them, confused. "What I did?" I asked quietly. Mom's eyes flashed. "You made us look bad, Laura. Everyone knows about that party." Then I understood. The story had already started spreading. Maybe a restaurant employee had mentioned it. Maybe one of Hannah's friends posted something. Either way, their perfect image was cracking, and they wanted me to fix it. But I had already done enough fixing for one lifetime. I stood straighter, meeting my mother's gaze. "You wanted to keep me busy," I said. "Now you are." Her lips tightened. Dad's jaw twitched. The tension hung there for a long, quiet moment before Mom hissed, "You've embarrassed this family." I almost laughed, not out of cruelty but disbelief. For years I'd carried their burdens without question. Now they called my silence humiliation. I didn't invite them in. I didn't argue. I just stepped aside enough to show them the folder on the table. "If you're here about money," I said calmly, "it's all there. Every payment, every receipt, all from my account." Mom's face faltered. Dad's eyes darted to the papers. "That's not the point," he said gruffly. "We're family. We don't keep score." "No," I said softly. "You don't." I did. For a second, none of us spoke. Outside, the wind whistled through the hallway, carrying someone else's laughter from the parking lot. It felt strangely far away, like it belonged to another world entirely. Finally, Mom straightened her jacket, muttering something about ungrateful children. Dad shook his head, and they left without another word. I waited until their footsteps faded, then closed the door and locked it. That night, I sat at my desk, the red folder still sitting beside me. My phone buzzed again, another round of calls I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and wrote a single email. No explanations, no accusations, just truth. I attached photos of the empty restaurant, the untouched cake, the chairs set for people who never came. I sent it to every relative, every neighbor, and every one of Hannah's friends whose contact I still had. The subject line was simple: the party I planned alone. Then I pressed send. For the first time in a long while, my chest felt light. I didn't cry and I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. By morning, I knew the ripple had started. The Bennett's picture-perfect reputation was cracking under the weight of truth. Calls doubled, then tripled, but I ignored them all. By Monday, Tara stopped by my cubicle again. "You're glowing," she said with a small smile. "Did something good happen?" I smiled back, the smallest one I'd felt in months. "Something real," I said. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not go back. Not to that house. Not to their stories. Not to the version of me that lived for their approval. I'd spent years mistaking usefulness for love. But now something had shifted. I didn't know where I was heading yet, only that it wouldn't be backward. And as the last light faded across the Missouri sky, I realized the truth: they might have gone to Paris. But I was the one finally leaving. By Monday morning, the storm had fully settled around me. Every corner of my parents' world was buzzing with whispers, neighbors, relatives, people from church. I hadn't needed to say a word beyond the truth I'd already sent. The photos spoke for themselves: an empty restaurant, untouched food and chairs set for people who never came. What I hadn't expected was how quiet my phone became after the initial outburst. The same family who couldn't stop calling me a day ago had gone silent overnight. The office felt different that week. When I walked in, Tara gave me a small smile, one that said she knew I was holding more inside than I let on. "You doing okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. Getting there. She didn't press. Just handed me a folder and said, "You're stronger than you think." Her quiet kindness was the first thing in days that didn't feel heavy. I spent the rest of that morning sorting through spreadsheets, but my mind kept drifting. The silence wasn't peace, it was waiting. I knew my parents too well. They wouldn't just accept humiliation, they'd plan a response. And when they finally showed up again, I wanted to be ready. That night I went home and laid everything out on the dining table, my lease, my bank records, my savings. The numbers were small, but they were mine. I stared at them for a long time, realizing they could become something bigger if I stopped spending energy on people who only drained it. Later that week, Tara stopped by my cubicle again, holding a printed flyer. "Remember that photography course I mentioned?" she said. "They've got one more open slot." I laughed softly. "Photography? I haven't touched a camera in years." She shrugged. "Maybe it's time." Her tone wasn't pushy, just steady, and for some reason, it stayed in my head long after she walked away. That evening, my parents called again, and this time I answered. Their faces filled my phone screen through a video chat, tight smiles and uneasy eyes. "We just want to talk," Mom began. "You've made quite a mess, Laura." Dad's voice followed low and sharp. "You think you can humiliate your family and walk away like nothing happened?" I didn't argue. I simply turned the camera to show the folder on my table, still labeled, "For when they come knocking." "Every expense came from my account," I said quietly. "You never offered a dime." Mom's face twisted, her voice rising. "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" I asked. The question hung in the air unanswered. They didn't want the truth, they wanted control. When they finally ended the call, the silence left behind felt cleaner somehow, like the air after a storm. That night I opened my laptop again and found the email from the photography school. The cursor blinked at the top of the form waiting. I filled it out without overthinking. Tuition wasn't cheap, but they offered monthly payments and I still had enough savings to get by. When I hit submit, I felt something shift inside me, small, quiet, but unmistakable. The next morning, I started packing small things into boxes, books, old photos, framed quotes that no longer comforted me. Each box made the apartment feel lighter. For once, I wasn't packing out of obligation. I was preparing for something new. I called Aunt Marianne in Portland, my mom's estranged sister, who had always been kind to me during childhood visits. "Of course, sweetheart," she said after I explained everything. "I've got a spare room. You take your time and get here when you can." That night I drafted my resignation letter, 2 weeks' notice, short and polite, no explanation. I left it on my boss's desk the next morning. He looked surprised but didn't argue. "You've been solid, Laura," he said. "Wish you'd stay." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, but I think it's time." As the days passed, the calls from home returned, mixed with messages from extended family. Cousins who had once adored my parents now reached out in disbelief. "Did they really leave for Paris?" One text read, "I can't believe they did that to you." I didn't reply. The truth was already out there. It didn't need defending. On the 10th day, my mom showed up at my door. I saw her silhouette through the peephole before she even knocked. Her voice came soft, trembling. "Laura, honey, we just want to talk." I hesitated, then opened the door halfway. She stepped inside, holding a stack of printed emails, mine the ones I'd sent out. "You've destroyed us," she whispered. "People are gossiping. Do you understand what you've done?" I met her eyes. I told the truth. She sank into a chair, shaking her head. "You think truth fixes anything? You've made your father a joke at work. Hannah can't even show her face at school." The words rolled over me, familiar and heavy. "So that's what matters to you," I said softly. "Not that you lied, not that you used me, just that people found out." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You always were dramatic," she muttered, standing up. "You've embarrassed everyone." "I didn't embarrass anyone," I replied. "You did that yourselves." For a second, something like shame flickered in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She smoothed her jacket, straightened her posture, and walked toward the door. "You'll regret this," she said. I let her go without a word. When the door closed, I sank into the couch and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. I thought of the little girl I used to be, the one who waited up for her parents to come home from their dinners, who believed effort could earn love. That girl had built this life, but she didn't have to stay trapped in it. That night, I opened my old camera drawer. It had been years since I'd touched it, but when I lifted the lens, dust motes danced in the light like tiny sparks. I cleaned it carefully, testing the shutter. The sound was soft but solid, a quiet reminder that something inside me still worked. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and drove to the edge of town. The sky was just beginning to lighten, shades of pink and gold spreading over the fields. I raised the camera and took a photo. The image came out blurry, imperfect, but real. That was enough. Over the next few days, I packed faster. Clothes, documents, dishes, everything found its place in a box. When my landlord stopped by, I gave notice. "Portland, huh?" he said with a grin. "Big change." I smiled back. "Yeah, it's time." On my last night in that apartment, I stood by the window watching headlights trace slow lines along the street below. My phone buzzed again, another string of missed calls lighting the screen. I didn't pick it up. I whispered to the quiet room, "I told you I'm busy." The following morning, I bought my ticket. One-way Columbia to Portland. Departure in 3 weeks. I pinned the printout above my desk. It wasn't escape. It was beginning. And though I didn't know what waited on the other side of that flight, I knew what I was leaving behind: the constant noise of needing to be enough for people who never saw me. The silence that filled the apartment that night wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. After the email spread, the Bennett's reputation cracked faster than I expected. By the end of the week, every neighbor on our street knew what happened. The story moved through the town like a quiet current, first whispered, then repeated until it became impossible to control. My parents' friends stopped inviting them to dinner. Hannah's classmates stopped liking her photos online. Even my dad's coworkers started avoiding him in the break room. They had always built their lives around appearances, and now the picture-perfect frame had shattered. Meanwhile, I kept packing. Each night, another box sealed, another drawer emptied. I didn't rush, but I didn't linger either. Every item I packed carried its own kind of weight, one that grew lighter the farther I moved from it. I sold what I could and donated the rest. My apartment grew quieter with each day, and I found myself starting to breathe again. My parents didn't show up for nearly a week after our last argument. When they did, it wasn't just them. They brought a police officer. I opened the door to find Mom clutching a folder and Dad standing stiff beside her. "She took money from our savings," Mom said sharply, as if rehearsed. "Thousands. We want it back." The officer's expression was neutral. "Ma'am, I'll need to see proof," he said calmly. Without a word, I walked to my table and handed him my red folder. "Every payment came from my account," I said. "Receipts, transfers, and statements, all mine." He scanned the document slowly, then looked up. "Everything checks out. There's no theft here." Mom's face drained of color. "This must be a misunderstanding," she stammered. Dad's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing at me. "We're family," he said. "You don't call the police on family." I met his gaze steadily. "You brought them here." For a moment, no one spoke. The officer thanked me for my time and stepped out, leaving the three of us standing in the narrow space of my entryway. Hannah had stayed behind in the car, her arms folded, eyes rolling at the window. Mom turned back to me, her voice tight. "You've embarrassed us enough," she said. "Whatever you think this proves, you're still part of this family." I shook my head. "Not anymore." When they left, the silence that followed was sharp but clean, like fresh air after a storm. I stood there for a long time before finally closing the door and locking it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. That night, I made myself dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, but it tasted better than anything I'd eaten in weeks. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was knowing I didn't owe anyone an explanation. When I finished, I pulled out my camera again. It had been sitting on the table since that morning, waiting. I turned it toward the window and snapped a picture of the skyline, the city lights glowing through the glass. The image came out slightly unfocused, but I didn't delete it. It was imperfect, but it was mine. The next morning, I went to work one last time. Tara met me at the door with 2 coffees in hand. "So you're really doing it," she said softly. I nodded. "Flight's in 2 weeks." She smiled. "You'll be great. Don't forget to send me pictures." We hugged, and for a second, I almost cried. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. For someone who saw me even briefly, without expectation. After turning in my office key and clearing my desk, I walked outside into the crisp Missouri air. The parking lot shimmered with heat from the sun, but I felt light as I crossed it. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number, another voicemail I didn't plan to check. Later that day, I received an email from Aunt Marianne confirming she'd cleared out her spare room. She attached a photo of her porch lined with ivy and a swing I remembered from childhood. "It's small," she wrote, "but it's peaceful. You'll like it here." For the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. By evening, my parents' calls turned into messages. Mom's tone shifted from anger to guilt. "We all make mistakes," one message read. Another said, "It's not too late to fix things." Then came Dad's short, sharp, and tired. "We can't move on if you keep dragging this out." Each word felt more like a command than an apology. I didn't reply to any of them. When I turned my phone face down, I caught sight of my reflection in the black screen. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked steady, unshaken. It wasn't happiness exactly, it was something quieter, steadier, a kind of peace that came from letting go. That weekend, I made one final trip to the dumpster behind my building. I carried the last box from the party unused decorations, extra invitations, leftover ribbons. I set it beside the bins, the sun catching the metallic edge of a balloon ribbon. Watching it sit there felt like setting a weight down for good. As I walked back upstairs, a neighbor I barely knew called out from the stairwell. "You moving out?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, heading west." She smiled. "Good for you." Simple words, but they stayed with me longer than I expected. That night, the phone rang again, Mom this time. I didn't answer. Then it rang again, and again. 12 times in an hour. Each call went to voicemail, piling up like old echoes I no longer needed to hear. When I finally listened later, her voice shifted through every tone she knew, pleading, scolding, bargaining. At the end of one, her voice cracked. "People are saying terrible things about us," she whispered. "You have to help." I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the river, the same river that once reflected that empty restaurant weeks ago. Only this time it didn't feel cold. It just felt like distance, steady, necessary distance. I picked up my camera again and took another photo. No faces, no family, just light and shadow across the water. The sound of the shutter clicked softly through the quiet room. For years I'd filled silence with apologies, explanations, and promises. But now silence felt like ownership. It was the sound of my own space, my own choice. As I turned off the lights that night, I noticed my red folder still sitting on the table. I almost put it away, but something stopped me. I left it there open, unhidden, a reminder that I no longer had to protect anyone's story, but my own. The next morning I woke before sunrise, made coffee, and sat by the window. My phone buzzed again one more time, and I didn't even look to see who it was. I just whispered the same 3 words I'd written once before. "I'm very busy." Outside, the first light of dawn spread across the city, soft and pale, hinting at something new. The weeks after the police visit passed quietly. My parents hadn't called since, at least not directly. Every now and then I'd catch their names lighting up on my screen, but the calls went unanswered. The distance between us had settled like fog, still present but not heavy anymore. My days became simple again. I'd wake early, drink coffee by the window, and watch the sun move across the rooftops while the city slowly came alive. Each morning, the red folder on my table reminded me how much had changed. I didn't touch it anymore. I didn't need to. My truth was out there, and for once, I didn't have to defend it. Most evenings, I walked through my half-empty apartment, sorting what to keep and what to let go. The space felt quieter, but not lonely, more like a room waiting to be lived in by someone new. One afternoon, I got a message from Aunt Marianne. Found a small art store down the street, it read. "They hire part-time students. Might be good for extra cash." She'd always been like that, practical, thoughtful, a steady voice in the noise. I thanked her and tucked the note away. My flight was 2 weeks out now, and with each day I felt Missouri slipping from my skin a little more. That Friday I boxed up the last of my things. The only item left on the wall was my travel confirmation, one-way to Portland departure in 10 days. I pinned it above my desk so I'd see it every morning, a quiet promise to myself. The following evening I was cleaning when a sharp knock sounded at the door. 3 hits, familiar and insistent. I hesitated before opening it. My mom stood there, her expression tight hair pulled back, hands clenched around her purse strap. Behind her, my dad waited, face unreadable. "Laura," she started, voice soft in a way that didn't suit her. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "About what?" She glanced down the hallway, lowering her voice. "People are saying things about us. Your aunt's telling everyone you're running away. You have to help fix this." I leaned against the doorframe. "You taught me to clean up your messes, remember? But this one isn't mine." Her lips parted, caught between pleading and pride. Dad stepped forward, his tone firm. "You owe us respect." I met his eyes. "No, Dad. I owed you honesty, and you threw it away in Paris." The hallway went still. Mom's expression hardened, and for the first time neither of them had anything left to say. After a few seconds, Dad muttered, "You'll regret this," then turned down the stairs. Mom followed her heels, echoing down the hall until the sound faded completely. I closed the door and locked it, the air inside feeling new again. I leaned against the wood for a moment, then exhaled slowly. Their absence didn't hurt this time. It sounded like space being made, space I could finally fill with my own life. Later that night, I sat by the window, camera in hand. The city outside was quiet, the lights blurring softly against the glass. I took a picture, no people, no drama, just light and shadow. The photo came out simple and calm. For years I'd taken pictures to remember moments for others. That night, I took one just for myself. The next morning, I started early, sorting through the last details before my move. I canceled utilities, returned borrowed items, and dropped off a few bags of clothes at a local shelter. When I handed them over, the volunteer, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled at me. "Starting over?" she asked. I nodded. "Good," she said simply. "Starting over is better than staying stuck." On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe near my apartment. It was the same one where I'd once planned Hannah's party, sitting for hours with checklists and receipts spread across the table. The same cafe where I'd thought love meant sacrifice. Now I just ordered coffee, sat by the window, and watched strangers pass by. Their lives moved without me needing to fix a single thing. When I got home, a text waited on my phone, one I didn't expect. From Dad, the screen read. I opened it slowly. "We didn't mean to hurt you. Things got out of hand. Come over this weekend and let's put this behind us." I stared at the message, unsure whether to laugh or cry. For years I would have jumped at that chance, a seat at the table, a promise of peace. But now the words felt hollow, behind us, as if nothing had ever happened, as if forgetting could replace forgiveness. I placed the phone face down and left it there. That night I made a small dinner and sat by the open window. The summer air carried the faint smell of rain, and the city lights flickered like they were breathing. I thought about how strange it was that peace could be so quiet. No confrontation, no dramatic ending, just stillness. A few days later, I mailed my apartment keys back to the landlord with a note thanking him for everything. I wanted to leave things the right way, no loose ends, no half-kept promises. The next morning, I called the airline to confirm my flight. Everything was set. That afternoon, I met Tara for lunch one last time. We sat on a park bench with sandwiches, the sun warm overhead. She listened as I told her about my planned school, the art store, Aunt Marianne's place. When I finished, she smiled. "You sound different," she said. "Lighter." I nodded. "I think I finally am." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photo, me sitting at my desk months ago, hair pulled back, eyes tired. "Took this the day before that party," she said. "Thought you might want to see how far you've come." I looked at the photo for a long time. "Thank you," I said quietly. That evening back home, I finished packing the last box. I placed my camera on top, the same one I'd used since college, the one I'd nearly forgotten I owned. I added a notebook beside it and closed the lid. The apartment looked bare now, but not empty. The echo of my footsteps didn't sound lonely anymore, it sounded free. I brewed one last cup of coffee and sat on the floor beside my suitcase. My phone buzzed again, one more call from Mom. I didn't pick up. The voicemail came through a minute later, her voice trembling. "Laura, please, let's talk. Families fight, but they forgive." I closed my eyes, listening until the message ended, then deleted it. Some words didn't need to live in my phone anymore. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows. I stood and looked out across the city, the light stretching far into the distance. I whispered softly, "I'm very busy," and smiled. The next morning, I'd leave Missouri behind. But that night, as I stood in the quiet glow of my empty home, I understood something I hadn't before. Leaving wasn't running away, it was walking toward something better. The morning of my departure came quietly, the kind of stillness that feels both heavy and freeing. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and a soft layer of fog hung over the city. My suitcase rolled behind me with a low hum as I walked down the narrow hallway for the last time. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old paint, a mixture that had once felt like home, but now just marked the end of something familiar. I reached the airport before dawn. The terminal lights glowed pale against the windows, and the faint echo of rolling luggage filled the space around me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, one last message from my mother. "Please come home. We need to talk." The same words as before, the same pattern. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back 3 simple words: "I'm very busy." I turned the phone off for good and slipped it into my bag. When the plane lifted off Missouri, spread out beneath the clouds, tiny streets, rows of houses, bits of memory shrinking until they were nothing more than shapes. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was leaving on purpose. Aunt Marianne met me at the Portland airport with a warm hug and a thermos of coffee. "Welcome home, kid," she said with a smile. That word home felt strange and new on her lips, softer than it had ever sounded before. We drove through gray morning streets to her little blue house on the edge of town. The paint was chipped and ivy curled along the porch rails. It was quiet in a way that made you want to whisper. Inside her living room was small but cozy shelves of books, a crackling fireplace, and the faint smell of cedar. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said. "No rules. No judgment." She showed me to a small spare room with a quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed. I unpacked only one thing that night: my camera. The next morning I woke to rain tapping softly against the window. I brewed coffee, pulled on a sweater, and stood outside on the porch. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of pine. It didn't feel like a new chapter yet, but it felt like space to find one. Later that afternoon, I walked downtown to the photography school. The building wasn't large, but its walls were covered in prints, landscapes, portraits, street shots. Each image told a story without words, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to tell mine too. The instructor, a woman named Ms. Collins, greeted me with a calm smile. She handed me a schedule and said, "We start simple here, light color composition. The rest comes when you stop trying to make it perfect." I nodded, taking the paper carefully, feeling like she understood something I hadn't said out loud. That evening, I set up my camera in front of the window. The light outside shifted between silver and gold as the rain eased. I adjusted the focus, watching droplets slide down the glass, then pressed the shutter. The sound was steady and familiar, like breathing. The days turned into a rhythm class in the morning, small part-time shifts at the art store in the afternoon, and long walks through the neighborhood at night. I started taking photos everywhere: old bridges, market stalls, faces in passing. Nothing fancy, just fragments of life. Each shot reminded me that beauty didn't always have to be polished. Sometimes it just had to be real. Aunt Marianne watched me one evening as I sorted through prints at the kitchen table. "You look lighter," she said softly, "like you're finally living for yourself." I didn't answer right away, but I smiled. She was right. A week later, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo, a picture of my old house in Missouri, the porch light on the front yard trimmed perfectly. On the back, a note in my mother's handwriting read, "You'll always have a place here." I stared at it for a long moment before setting it aside. That porch light didn't mean welcome anymore. It meant control. I slipped the photo into a drawer and went back to editing my pictures. The next morning, I woke to clear skies. For the first time since arriving, sunlight poured through the window. I decided to take my camera downtown to the Riverwalk. The air smelled faintly of salt from the coast, and the water shimmered with morning light. I photographed the reflection of the sky against the water, the movement of people walking dogs, the glint of bicycle wheels. Each frame felt like a step toward something whole. That evening, I sat with Aunt Marianne on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. She poured 2 glasses of iced tea and said, "Your mom called me last week." I looked at her, waiting. "She wanted me to convince you to come home." I sighed quietly. "What did you say I told her you already were home?" she said, eyes softening. Just not the way she meant. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets start their song. The air cooled, and for the first time I felt the kind of peace that didn't need anyone else's permission. A few days later, my photography instructor asked each of us to bring in one picture that meant something personal. I chose the photo I'd taken my first night here, the blurry one through the rain. When it was my turn, I placed it on the table and said quietly, "This was the first photo I took after deciding to start over." The room stayed quiet, and Ms. Collins smiled. "Then it's your first honest one," she said. Walking home that afternoon, I thought about everything that had happened: the party, the betrayal, the noise. It all felt far away now, like an old photograph left out in the sun, faded but still real. That night, I brewed a cup of tea and stood by the window again, watching the city lights reflect against the glass. I picked up my camera and took one last picture. The shutter clicked softly, capturing nothing special, just light stillness and a sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be. For the first time, I wasn't looking back. The next day, I'd get a call that would bring my family's voices crashing back into my new world. But for now, in this moment, the quiet was mine to keep. It had been nearly a month since I left Missouri when the call finally came. I was in the school darkroom, developing photos, the soft red light filling the space like a heartbeat. My phone buzzed on the counter beside me, and I almost ignored it. But when I saw the name flashing on the screen, Mom, something in me hesitated. I let it ring once, twice before answering. "Laura." Her voice sounded strained, thinner than I remembered. "We need to talk." I didn't respond right away, so she continued. "People won't let it go. Your father's co-workers, the neighbors, they're all still talking about Paris. You have to say something." I leaned against the counter, letting her words settle. "Mom, the truth doesn't disappear because it's inconvenient." She sighed heavily. "You've embarrassed us enough. Your sister's miserable. You ruined her birthday, her friendships, her reputation." I closed my eyes. "You did that yourselves," I said quietly. "I just stopped covering for it." The silence that followed felt colder than any distance between us. Then her voice cracked soft and small. "Please, Laura. We can fix this together." I ended the call without another word. That night I sat on the porch with Aunt Marianne. The air was cool, the kind that carried the scent of rain and wood smoke. "They called," she asked gently. I nodded. "They want me to clean up their mess again." She looked out toward the trees, then back at me. "You don't owe them that anymore." For the first time, I didn't feel the need to argue. The next morning I went to class early. Ms. Collins was reviewing a series of prints when I arrived. "Yours are coming along beautifully," she said. "You have an eye for stillness?" Her words carried weight. I'd spent years trying to capture motion to keep up with everyone else. Stillness felt foreign but honest. That afternoon, while walking home, I stopped by the river. The light shimmered against the surface, broken only by the ripples of passing boats. I lifted my camera and took a photo sunlight water movement. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to see beauty in something imperfect. Later that week, the phone calls started again. Mom, Dad, even Hannah. One after another, the same pattern: first anger, then pleading, then guilt. The voicemails came in waves. "You can't just walk away, Laura. Family forgives, but you're making it impossible. People are laughing at us." Each message blended into the next until they all sounded the same. I stopped listening after a while. Instead, I poured myself into my work. My photos were starting to draw attention. Ms. Collins asked to include one in the school's upcoming exhibit, a small show at a local gallery. "It's a big deal," she said. "You should invite someone." I smiled faintly. Maybe. The day of the exhibit arrived on a Thursday evening. The gallery was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist downtown. Warm light spilled through the windows as people drifted inside holding glasses of wine and murmuring over the photographs. My piece hung near the center rain on glass, the same image I'd taken my first night in Portland. As I stood there, a familiar vibration buzzed against my wrist, another call. I stepped outside to check it, the cool air brushing my face. "Dad!" I almost put the phone back in my pocket, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Laura?" he said immediately. "This has gone too far." His tone was sharp, all control and no softness. "You've hurt this family more than you realize." I took a steady breath. "Dad, you chose appearances over your daughter. You can't guilt me into pretending that didn't happen." He exhaled heavily. "You think you're so righteous? Do you have any idea how hard we've worked to fix this? I'm not the one who broke it." The silence stretched. Then quietly he said, "Your mother isn't sleeping. Hannah barely leaves her room. We didn't mean for things to go this far." I swallowed, my voice steady, but gentle. "You went to Paris while I waited alone in that restaurant. Everything that came after was yours to face." He didn't reply, just breathing on the other end of the line. Finally he said, "You've changed. I had to." I hung up and stood there for a moment, the night settling around me like a blanket. Through the glass I could see people gathered around my photograph, pointing, smiling. Ms. Collins caught my eye and gave me a nod of quiet pride. I stepped back inside. After the show, a few students and I walked along the waterfront. The air was crisp and laughter echoed between the buildings. One of them, a girl named Mara, asked, "You're the one who took the rain photo, right?" "Yeah," I said. "It felt peaceful," she said softly. "Like standing in the middle of a storm but not getting pulled in." Her words stayed with me long after we said goodnight. When I got home, Aunt Marianne was sitting on the couch reading. She looked up when I came in. "How was it?" "It was good," I said, setting my camera down. "Better than I expected." She smiled. "You're making something of your own now. That's what matters." I sat beside her, and for a while, neither of us spoke. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heater and the ticking of the clock. I thought of my parents' voices, the constant pull of their demands. For years I'd thought silence meant loneliness, but sitting there surrounded by warmth and calm, I realized it could also mean peace. Over the next few days, the calls slowed. Maybe they'd finally understood that I wasn't coming back, or maybe they were just tired of being ignored. Either way, the noise faded, replaced by something steady and calm. That weekend, I took a bus to the coast. The weather was clear, and the horizon stretched endlessly ahead. I walked barefoot through the sand, the ocean roaring beside me. I lifted my camera, aimed it toward the sun sinking low over the water, and took a picture. The image glowed softly on the screen light, spilling over waves endless and open. It didn't need a caption. It didn't need explanation. For the first time, I wasn't taking a picture of what I'd lost. I was capturing what I'd found. As I stood there, the wind tangling my hair, my phone vibrated again. One new voicemail. I didn't listen. Not yet. I slipped it into my pocket, took one more photo, and turned toward the road home. Tomorrow I would listen to that message, but tonight the ocean belonged to me. When I got back from the coast, the house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards. I slipped off my shoes, still dusted with sand, and set my camera on the counter. The last light of evening slanted through the windows, warm and steady, and I finally felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace without condition. My phone sat on the table where I'd left it, one new voicemail waiting. I hesitated for a moment before pressing play. It was my mother's voice, soft and unsteady. "Laura, I don't know what to say anymore. We thought we were teaching you strength, but maybe we just made you small. I hope someday you'll understand we didn't mean to hurt you." Her voice cracked near the end. "Just take care of yourself." When the message finished, I stood there in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't replay it. I just let her words hang in the air until they faded into the stillness of the room. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first time she'd spoken without pride. Aunt Marianne appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." She smiled, that small, knowing kind of smile that didn't need words, and left me to my thoughts. I walked out onto the porch where the evening breeze carried the faint scent of rain. The sky was painted in shades of rose and gold, the kind of light photographers dream about. I lifted my camera, took a slow breath, and pressed the shutter. The photo wasn't about loss or proof anymore. It was about presence, about standing where I was no longer looking back. Over the next few weeks, life fell into a quiet rhythm. I took more photos, worked part-time at the art store, and helped Aunt Marianne plant flowers in the small patch of soil beside the porch. We'd spend evenings there sipping tea and talking about ordinary things, the weather, her customers, the neighbor's cat that always found its way to our steps. Simple moments, but they filled the space that used to ache. Sometimes I'd check my phone out of habit. The calls from home had stopped. Maybe they'd finally realized I wasn't coming back. Maybe they'd learned to live with the silence. Whatever the reason, I didn't feel anger anymore, just distance, the kind that allows you to breathe. One afternoon, Ms. Collins asked me to stay after class. "You've got something special, Laura," she said, handing me a printed copy of one of my photographs, the one I'd taken on the coast. "We're submitting this for a regional showcase. It deserves to be seen." I held the print in my hands, tracing the edges with my thumb. The image showed the ocean stretching endlessly, sunlight scattering across the water. For the first time, I saw more than a picture. I saw proof of what I'd survived. The night of the showcase, the gallery buzzed with quiet conversation. My photograph hung among dozens of others, yet somehow it drew people in. I stood in the corner, watching strangers pause and look closer, their faces softening as they did. One woman turned to me and said, "It feels peaceful." I smiled. That's what I was hoping for. After the event, I walked home alone. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and every reflection reminded me of that first night in the restaurant, the empty chairs, the untouched cake, the silence that used to hurt. Now that memory didn't sting anymore. It had become a marker of where I'd begun. When I got home, Aunt Marianne was waiting up, reading by the fire. She looked up when I came in. "How was it?" "It was beautiful," I said. Not because of the crowd, just because I was there. She nodded, closing her book. Sometimes being present is the whole victory. I smiled, realizing she was right. The version of me that once needed to be seen, needed to be chosen, was gone. In her place was someone quieter, steadier, someone who had finally chosen herself. That night before bed, I went through my old camera roll. Between pictures of Portland sunsets and school projects were the remnants of my past life. Hannah's birthday decorations, family dinners, 1,000 small efforts to be enough. I didn't delete them. I didn't need to. They were part of the road that brought me here, and I could finally look at them without pain. The next morning, I woke early to the sound of rain. I made coffee and opened the window, letting the cool air drift in. The sky was gray, but the light felt soft. I raised my camera once more and took a picture of the world outside, quiet, imperfect, and alive. As the shutter clicked, I realized the simplest truth of all peace doesn't always come from justice. Sometimes it comes from choosing not to carry what broke you. So if you've ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth, I hope you know this. You're allowed to build a life that doesn't need their permission. And if you're still on your way there, take your time. The light will find you again. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to take care of yourself today. You deserve that peace too.